The Grand Council of the Vel'Thor Empire had convened exactly 3 times in the last millennium. Once when they'd discovered faster-than-light travel. Once when they'd accidentally obliterated their second favorite moon. And now, apparently, because they'd just gotten their collective asses handed to them by what they thought was a full human military deployment. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Admiral Vel'Thor stood before the assembled royalty, his forearms clasped behind his back in what he hoped looked like dignified military bearing rather than, "please don't execute me," posture. His scales had gone from their usual proud purple to a sort of embarrassed mauve that really didn't do him any favors under the throne room's harsh lighting. "Explain," commanded High Regent Vosamar, whose crown was so ridiculously ornate it probably had its own gravitational field. "Explain how the pride of the Vel'Thor Armada, 7 battlecruisers, 23 destroyers, and approximately 400 support craft, was routed by a single human vessel." "Well," Vel'Thor began, his throat membranes vibrating with anxiety, "that's not technically accurate, Your Luminescence." The Regent's eye stalks swiveled ominously. "Oh, wonderful. So there were 2 human vessels?" "No, Your Luminescence. There were 37 humans. You could have heard a pin drop." Well, if anyone still used pins in a civilization that had mastered nanotechnology, you could have heard a nanoscopic robotic pin drop anyway. 37, the Regent repeated slowly, in the tone of someone trying very hard not to start screaming. 37, Vel'Thor confirmed miserably. "We sent 400 ships against 37 beings. Yes, Your Luminescence. And we lost. Technically, we achieved a tactical withdrawal. We ran away." So much for regal decorum. The thing about humanity, and this was something the Vel'Thor were currently learning the hard way, was that they'd been fighting each other for basically their entire existence. While most species discovered space travel and thought, "Oh good, now we can focus on science and exploration and maybe some light colonization," humans looked at the galaxy and thought, "Sweet, a whole new place to figure out how to kill things more efficiently." It wasn't that they were particularly bloodthirsty. Well, okay, they were a little bloodthirsty. But mostly they were creative. And paranoid. And very, very good at taking whatever you threw at them and finding 17 different ways to throw it back harder. The Vel'Thor, by contrast, had fought maybe 3 wars in their entire history, all of which they'd won through sheer technological superiority and by fielding absolutely overwhelming numbers. Their battle doctrine could be summarized as, bring everything, point it at the enemy, shoot until the shooting stops. Sophisticated stuff. Lieutenant Commander David Mitchell, call sign Brick, because he had all the personality of a particularly charismatic cinderblock, was currently explaining this cultural difference to his commanding officer via quantum-encrypted transmission. "So let me get this straight," said Captain Reeves, whose face on the view screen looked like she was trying to decide whether to laugh or file paperwork. "You encountered a Vel'Thor fleet of—" She glanced at something off-screen. "Holy shit, 400 ships?" "Yes, ma'am." "And your response was to engage?" "They fired first, ma'am." "Brick, they had 400 ships. You have a scout corvette with a crew of 37. 36 now, ma'am. Jenkins got a concussion." "Jenkins always gets a concussion. How is that relevant?" "Just wanted to be accurate with the personnel count, ma'am." Captain Reeves pinched the bridge of her nose. "Continue." "Well, ma'am, they hit us with their opening salvo. Standard plasma barrage. Nothing fancy. Knocked out our main engines, fried about 60% of our defensive systems. By all accounts, we should have been space dust. But then Hernandez pointed out that their fleet formation was absolute garbage. I mean, we're talking tactical doctrine from like the 19th century. Everything bunched up, overlapping firing solutions, no spatial awareness whatsoever. So you decided to not die." "We decided to not die, yes ma'am. Seemed like the polite thing to do." What Brick wasn't mentioning, because he was modest like that, or possibly because he was too dumb to realize how insane it sounded, was that his crew had spent the next 6 hours turning a scout corvette with minimal armament into the universe's most annoying mosquito. The Vel'Thor had opened with what they considered an overwhelming show of force. This was, admittedly, quite impressive if you were into that sort of thing. 7 massive battle cruisers, each one the size of a small city, bristling with enough firepower to crack a planet. 23 destroyers providing support and coverage. Hundreds of smaller craft forming a perimeter. It looked terrifying. It looked unstoppable. It looked like every single ship was getting in every other ship's way. "Sir, they're firing again," reported Ensign Martinez, who handled navigation and sensor operations, and was currently watching the tactical display with the kind of fascination usually reserved for train wrecks. "Where?" asked Brick. "Everywhere, sir. Just everywhere. No target prioritization, no firing coordination. I think 3 of their destroyers just hit one of their own cruisers." Huh. Brick considered this. "Well, that's unfortunate for them. Jenkins, how's our maneuvering?" Jenkins, sporting a fresh bandage from where he'd smacked his head during the initial attack, grinned from the engineering console. "Got auxiliary thrusters back online. We're not winning any races, but we can move." "Good enough. Martinez, plot us a course directly through their formation." "Sir, that seems inadvisable." "Probably. Do it anyway." Here's the thing about space combat that most civilians don't understand. It's 3-dimensional. It happens at ridiculous speeds. And if you're not constantly accounting for momentum, inertia, and about 17 different kinds of physics, you're going to have a very bad day. The Vel'Thor, having won their previous wars through sheer numerical superiority, had never really needed to worry about tactics beyond point all the guns at the thing. This worked fine when you were fighting an enemy who was either equally tactically incompetent or so vastly outnumbered they couldn't exploit your weaknesses. Humanity, meanwhile, had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of punching above their weight class. They'd fought wars on land, sea, air, and space. They'd figured out how to win battles while outnumbered, outgunned, and generally having a bad time. And they'd codified all of that hard-won knowledge into training that every single human military member received. Even the ones flying scout corvettes with crews of 37. Threading the needle in 3, 2, 1. Martinez's fingers danced across her console. The human scout ship, barely a tenth the size of the smallest Vel'Thor destroyer, punched through the center of their formation at a velocity that made the laws of physics file a formal complaint. As it went, it did something the Vel'Thor had never encountered before. It launched chaff and countermeasures. Now, chaff isn't complicated. It's literally just a bunch of reflective material designed to confuse targeting sensors. Humanity had been using it since the 20th century. But the Vel'Thor, having never faced an opponent who couldn't simply be buried under superior firepower, had never bothered to develop countermeasures for countermeasures. The result was spectacular. 12 Vel'Thor ships, trying to track the human vessel, instead locked onto the chaff signatures. 12 ships fired. 12 ships hit each other. "Sir, I think we just got 7 confirmed kills without firing a shot," Martinez reported, her voice caught between professional military bearing and hysterical laughter. "That's nice," said Brick, studying the tactical display. "Hernandez, how are our weapons?" Chief Petty Officer Hernandez looked up from the weapons console, where she'd been performing what could charitably be called creative maintenance, and more accurately described as percussive engineering. "Port railgun is maybe operational. Starboard missiles are a no-go. Point defense is working, but we've got maybe 6 rounds of ammunition left." "So what you're saying is we need to make this count." "What I'm saying, sir, is that we're flying a broken ship with 1 working gun and a prayer." "Hernandez, I'm touched. I didn't know you were religious." "I'm not. That's how bad our situation is." Back in the Vel'Thor command ship, Admiral Krekthar was having what humans would call a moment. "How?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "Are they still alive?" "Unknown, Admiral. They're moving in ways that don't make sense. Random acceleration, unpredictable vectors, no consistent pattern." "Then saturate the area with fire. They can't dodge if there's nowhere to dodge to." This was, technically, sound logic. In practice, it resulted in the Vel'Thor firing approximately 40,000 shots into a 3-dimensional space where the human ship had been 2 seconds ago. The human ship, having anticipated this brilliant strategy, had already moved. "They're heading for the asteroid belt," reported the tactical officer. "Excellent." We'll have them trapped! Sir, I don't think... Ready all weapons. We end this now! What Admiral Krekthar didn't know, because the Vel'Thor had never bothered to study human military history, was that humanity had a long, proud tradition of turning terrain to their advantage. They'd fought in jungles, cities, mountains, and every other environment imaginable. And they'd learned that sometimes the best weapon wasn't the gun you were carrying, but the environment you were fighting in. They're following us into the belt, Martinez reported unnecessarily, because everyone could see the absolutely stupid number of Vel'Thor ships trying to navigate through the asteroid field. Good, said Brick. Hernandez, how's that railgun? Still maybe operational. I need better than maybe. Best I can do is probably. I'll take it. Martinez, target the biggest rock you can find. Somewhere near the center of their formation. Sir, the railgun doesn't have enough power to destroy an asteroid. Who said anything about destroying it? Understanding dawned on Martinez's face. Oh, that's evil. That's tactics. Fire when ready. The railgun, a weapon designed to punch through starship armor by accelerating a slug of metal to an appreciable fraction of the speed of light, had exactly enough power to nudge a several thousand-ton asteroid. Just a little nudge. Just enough to change its trajectory. The asteroid, previously minding its own business in a stable orbit, suddenly found itself on a collision course with 3 Vel'Thor destroyers. The destroyers, focused entirely on trying to acquire a firing solution on the human ship, and not particularly worried about the stationary space rocks around them, noticed the problem roughly 2 seconds before impact. 2 seconds is not a lot of time when you're a capital ship with a maximum turning radius measured in kilometers. Did we just... began Hernandez. Yep, said Brick. Are we going to... Yep. This is insane. Yep. For the next 30 minutes, the human scout ship proceeded to play the universe's deadliest game of billiards, using the Vel'Thor fleet as balls and asteroids as cues. Every time the Vel'Thor ships tried to maneuver, the humans would calculate trajectories, fire their one working railgun, and send another space rock careening into the fleet. It was elegant. It was efficient. It was absolutely infuriating if you were on the receiving end. Cease fire! Admiral Krekthar finally screamed after watching his 15th ship get taken out by what was technically a naturally occurring celestial object. All ships, retreat to safe distance. Now! The human crew watched as the Vel'Thor fleet limped away, leaving behind a debris field that would probably confuse archaeologists for centuries. So, said Jenkins, breaking the silence, did we just win? I think we did, said Brick, with one gun. One maybe operational gun, Hernandez corrected, against 400 ships. Well, they did most of the work themselves, Martinez pointed out. We just helped. The aftermath of the battle was, in some ways, even more entertaining than the battle itself. The Vel'Thor Empire, faced with the humiliating reality that they'd lost to a scout ship, did what any reasonable civilization would do. They tried to spin it. Initial reports claimed they'd fought a human battle group, then a fleet, then an entire naval task force. The problem was that humanity, having won the fight, was more than happy to share exactly what had happened, complete with tactical recordings, sensor logs, and a particularly devastating after-action report written by Lieutenant Commander Mitchell that somehow managed to be both professionally military and absolutely dripping with sarcasm. The report's summary section read, in its entirety, enemy engaged with numerical superiority of approximately 11 to 1 in terms of ships, and roughly 1,000 to 1 in terms of tonnage. Enemy displayed tactical incompetence consistent with a civilization that has never faced a near-peer adversary. Recommend diplomatic contact rather than military engagement, as they seem like nice folks who just need better training. That last line, according to Brick later, was added because Captain Reeves made him. The report circulated through the human navy, then through human diplomatic channels. Then, inevitably, it leaked to the press. The galactic community's reaction could be summarized as, wait, what? Because here's the thing about the galaxy. The Vel'Thor weren't pushovers. They were a major power, an old empire with serious resources and technology. They weren't supposed to lose to a scout ship. But they had. And now everyone knew it. 3 months later, the Vel'Thor Empire requested a formal diplomatic meeting with the Human Federation. High Regent Vosimar, looking significantly more humble than he had at the War Council, stood before the human delegation in what both sides had agreed to call a cultural exchange. "We wish to understand," the regent began, his translator rendering his speech into flawless English, "how your military is so effective." Ambassador Williams, a career diplomat who'd been briefed on the situation and had spent the entire shuttle ride trying not to laugh, nodded seriously. "Your luminescence. The human military has a long and complicated history. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years." "We gathered that. What we don't understand is how a single scout ship could defeat a battle fleet." "Well, that comes down to training, tactical doctrine, and honestly a lot of luck." Williams paused. "Also, and I mean this with all due respect, your fleet formation was terrible." "Yes, we've been told," the regent said dryly. "Admiral Krekthar mentioned it. Repeatedly. While cleaning out his former office." "Former?" "We decided his talents were better suited to administrative duties, far from anything resembling command authority." "Wise choice." The regent's eye stalks drooped slightly. "Ambassador, we are not a warlike people. We never have been. Our previous military victories came from simply having more ships than our opponents. But you humans, you think about war differently." "We do," Williams agreed. "We've had to. We spent most of our history fighting each other, so we learned to win without overwhelming force. We learned creativity, adaptation, and how to exploit enemy weaknesses. And now you offer to teach us these things. We offer to teach you defensive tactics, yes. And in exchange, we'd like to learn about your propulsion technology, which we understand is significantly more efficient than ours." The regent considered this. "A fair trade. Though I must ask, why are you being so generous? We fired upon your ship first." Williams smiled. "Your luminescence. We've reviewed the sensor logs. Your fleet commander thought we were a military vessel entering your territory. He acted to defend his people. That's not villainy. That's bad intelligence and worse tactics. We can fix both of those things." "And the ship that defeated our fleet, this Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, is he some sort of elite warrior? A special forces commander? Brick?" "No, he's just a regular Scout Corps officer. Decent guy, terrible at poker, has a weird obsession with 20th century military history." "Just regular." "Regular," Williams confirmed. "That ship's crew was 37 random naval personnel on a routine patrol. You want to know what's really terrifying? That wasn't even close to our best." The regent's scales went pale. "But that's exactly why we're offering this exchange," Williams continued quickly. "You seem like reasonable people who just happen to be really bad at war. We're pretty good at war, but honestly, your scientists could teach our scientists a thing or two. This could work out for everyone." The regent was quiet for a long moment. Then his eye stalks straightened, and something like resolve settled over his features. "Very well, Ambassador Williams. The Vel'Thor Empire accepts your offer. We will learn from you, and you will learn from us. Perhaps together, we can ensure that such misunderstandings do not happen again. That's the hope, your luminescence." They shook hands. Well, Ambassador Williams shook one of the regent's 4 hands, and sealed an agreement that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. 6 months later, Lieutenant Commander David Mitchell stood in front of a classroom full of Vel'Thor military cadets, pulling up the tactical recording of his battle with their fleet. "All right," he said, looking at the 50 eager faces staring back at him. "Who can tell me the first major mistake Admiral Krekthar made?" A cadet in the front row raised 2 arms. "He engaged without proper intelligence?" "Good guess, but no. Look at the formation." Brick zoomed in on the clustered fleet. "This is the mistake. Everything else, the friendly fire, the confusion, the chaos, all of it stems from this. Your ships had no room to maneuver, no clear firing lanes, and no spatial awareness. It looked intimidating, but the moment someone fought back, it became a death trap." He pulled up a human formation for comparison. "See the difference? Every ship has clear lines of fire and room to move.